Oh, that's cute. I could totally make that at home. Have you ever heard that at your booth? Well, if so, you're not alone. And I really don't believe that people are meant to be rude, but it does come off as dismissive, and it can really sting. I don't think they really realize how much time, skill, and experience can go into our homemade items. And I remember about a couple years ago, it really hit home. I was actually doing a craft sale with some friends in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I remember coming out of the bathroom, walking back to the booth, and an individual was carrying a cutting board I had made with Santa on it. And I just remember looking at him and saying, "Oh my gosh, that was like one of my favorite items." And it didn't dawn on me. He didn't know I was the one that made it. He looked at me and he's like, "Yep, and it's the only one, and I have it." And that really struck gold with me. He bought that because one, not only did he like it, but it was unique, and he knew there wasn't another one like it. And that was a huge lesson for me. I need to elevate my game more. Unique, creative items sell. Hi, my name is Sylvia from Backyard Brushes in Fountain City, Wisconsin. And in today's video, I'll be making a couple projects that for this holiday season that hopefully aren't like easily replicated. You just can't go to Walmart and buy these products I used. They're coming straight from my creative toolbox that I have built over time. I'll be using products like IOD, DIY, Fusion, Dixie Belle. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's get creating. For project 1, I'll be transforming this glass jug that I paid like $2 for at a thrift store. Before I started, I did spray it with a Rust-Oleum clear coat for the paint to have something to adhere to. Using a chip brush, I'm giving the glass jug a complete coat of Midnight Blue by Fusion. Once that was dry, I used Dixie Belle Iron Patina paint, and I gave it a complete base coat over the blue and let it dry. I then gave it a second coat, and I am using the chip brush, trying to get some texture on top of it all. And once it dried, I went through with the Dixie Belle green patina spray, and I then followed up with the blue patina spray. I'm just kind of mixing it up and experimenting as I go. And you do spray on top of the patina paint when the second coat is wet. I then had to practice my patience while the patina dried. Using Big Top by DIY, I did seal the jug, and well, here's what it looks like, and you can see the texture. However, it's not completely dry yet from the Big Top. To mold my Santa, and I am so in love with this IOD Saint Nick mold. First, I used cornstarch so that the clay would come out. I had put a lot of cornstarch in there. So I'm just using a brush, a paintbrush, to remove a lot of that excess cornstarch and make sure that it's an even spread throughout the mold. Using IOD air dry clay, first I kind of smushed it around in my hands to knead it. And now I'm just going to press it into the mold. And I use my fingers to press it down and like smash it together. And I just keep using my fingers, moving the clay down into the mold. And once I've got the mold completely covered in clay, I start using my fingers to smooth out the top of the clay and remove the excess from the ridges. And that's what's really nice about the IOD molds, is how they have those ridges. I do get my IOD products from Sonnet's Garden Blooms, The Painted Photographer, Sandra at Midwest Charm, and also Julie's Signs and Designs. And I can leave a link in the description below. Look how beautiful he is, and with all that detail, seriously, I am in love with the Santa. So once I have the Santa out and he's still soft and malleable, I'm using Type Bond, Quick and Thick, giving it a really good coat, and I might smush it around a little bit with my fingers if I need to. And I'm just going to place that Santa right into the middle of my jug and gently press down, adhering the Santa to my jug with my fingers. It's still soft, it's still malleable, and I just want to be careful so I don't mess up those beautiful details from that mold. And using a baby wipe, I just gently remove any glue that might have seeped out. And since it's been sealed in Big Top, it's a lot easier to wipe it down, and I'm not worried about removing any of that paint. I decided to use raw silk from Fusion, which is actually leftover paint from what is on its maker's box, to give my Santa a base coat. And usually with Fusion mineral paints, you don't need to seal the paint. However, I'm going to be using wax, so I did feel more comfortable using DIY Big Top or even liquid patina to give it a good seal. Once that dried overnight, I went in with a clear wax and just dabbed my Santa right up, knowing the clear wax would help tone down a little bit of the darker wax I'll be using. I go in with a dark wax by DIY, and I just stifle all the way around my Santa, making sure to press in and get into all those fine details. I use a paper towel and I gently remove all the excess wax. And this is what happened. My camera went dead. So what I end up doing is using Shipwreck right on top of, after I removed the excess dark wax, I went over with the same process and I added DIY Shipwreck, which has a nice blue tone to it. Then, using a copper gilding wax and a paintbrush, I just went around and I painted my whole Santa with the copper. And when painting with wax on top of wax in a molded product, it was more like I was laying the paint on top versus painting it and smoothing it in. Then I did take the copper and I went around and I would just rub it into various random areas around the jug. And if I felt like it got a little too dark, I could just take that brown waxed brush and go right over it and tone it down. Then I thought I needed some of that blue Shipwreck, and I would just kind of buff that right into my jug also. And if I needed to tone it down a little, I just bring it right in with that brown wax. I wasn't sure if Shipwreck would work for this project, and I spoke with Sandra from Midwest Charm, and she reminded me if I didn't like it, I can always take the wax off with the clear wax. And when it was dry, I just added a little red velvet ribbon and some greenery. For project 2, I'm going to transform a couple saws that I picked up at some local flea markets. And whenever I'm going to be painting over rusty metal, I try to remove as much of that rusty goodness as I can so it doesn't leak through the paint. So first thing I'm doing is I'm setting up some rusty tools. Since I'm going to do the 2 saws, I might as well do a couple other tools I'll be using in later projects. And I'm just layering them into a container. And I'm just going to use a vinegar and dump it right in. I used to use like a 1:1 ratio of vinegar and water. And one of my viewers just said, you know what? Just use the vinegar. You don't even need to use the water. And I'm like, perfect. It just takes more off and quicker, I guess. And it does. So then I just went in with the baby wipes and would clean off that rusty goodness. For the first saw, I chose Highlander by Fusion, and I'm just going to give that handle a coat. And then I realized, oh yeah, there's the hardware in the handle of the saw, and I don't want to get that covered up with paint. So I usually use Vaseline, and I paint Vaseline over the metal that I don't want paint to cover. The Vaseline blocks the paint from adhering. Then I just go over the handle and I painted red from Fusion. For the second saw, I used the same process. I covered the metal hardware with Vaseline, and I chose Dixie Belle Collard Green to use. It's my first time using this paint. I've seen other projects made with it, and I just loved it. It's a little bit darker than I had anticipated for this project. And I painted the whole saw with the collard green. Using DIY Big Top, I sealed the metal blade and also the wood handle. And I did spray this blade with Rust-Oleum before I painted it. I just didn't show that in the video. I also went and covered the handle with Big Top with the saw, the red saw handle, even though I really technically don't need to. I am now going to try the Dixie Belle Crackle Medium on the green saw, and it says to give a really good coat, really thick coat. So I let that dry overnight. And in the meantime, I'm using the Salvation Solution by DIY over the blade for the red saw, since it was still pretty corroded or rusted. It didn't clean off as well as this other saw. I let that dry overnight. I came back and I used Cast Iron by Fusion to paint the saw blades. And I always do the back. So now that the crackle has dried from Dixie Belle, I am going over with crinoline from DIY, and I totally forgot you're just supposed to lay it on there and don't rub over it or go over it at all. And I kind of forgot that, but at least when I messed up, it's in the area of the saw that'll be later covered. But you're just supposed to get a really good thick coat of paint, go over it, don't go back over it. It messes up the crackle. So that is a mistake I made, learn from my lesson. However, I still went with it and I got the crackled effect, and the area that I didn't do so well on will actually be covered up. Once that dried, I did seal it again with Big Top. And you can see the crackling that I did receive, and it has the colored green blade underneath the crackle, which matches the colored green handle. I chose to use one of the new IOD holiday release stamps, and I apologize, I don't remember the name. I just love all the Santas. And first I sanded my stamp because it was the first time I was using them. Then I juiced up the top part of Santa with IOD mixing white ink, and I just pressed firmly straight down on the blade. And then when I lifted it up, I could barely see it, which was not the effect I was going for. Fortunately, I could use a baby wipe and I could wipe that right off. I then decided to try this silver metallic stamp I have from Reflections, which is also an archival ink. So I back to the drawing board. I went back to my Santa stamp and I juiced up or stamped really well the first half of the top half of the Santa, and I placed it right back onto that blade which had dried, and I just pressed down firmly all over the Santa, and then I lift him up. And I got more of that effect I was going for. So using a stamp set that I actually bought at a thrift store, I stamped on Santas using that silver ink. And then I switched it up to Workshop and I just pressed on the Workshop. For $2, the stamp set it's just great. I don't know what company made it, but it has multiples of many of the letters, so I don't have to go back and stamp multiple letters in a word. I then decided to add some snowflakes from, I don't know, 2 years ago's IOD's holiday release, so maybe 2023. So I just stamped using the same ink some snowflakes right onto the blade and also on the handle of the saw. I just felt like it just gave it a little something extra. I did use a heat gun to set the ink, but I did not get that on camera. And there's the third stamp. There we go. I just press right onto the handle and I lift it right up. I then choose Big Top to seal it. And I felt like my ink smeared a little bit, so I did not seal the blade in Big Top. I waited and I went outside and I just gave it a light spray of Rust-Oleum to seal the blade. For the next one, I'm using a Santa from Candy Cane Lane that I still had. It was an IOD release a couple years ago. I don't even think you can buy it anymore. And I just laid that transfer right onto the saw, right over that textured crackle, and I just pressed it right on using the tool that comes with the transfers. I just rubbed gently all the way around the transfer and peeled it off as I went. I usually go by an angle. And what was really nice is that blade, I was able to cut the excess transfer off And I used the back of the transfer to varnish it, which is pressing and sealing the transfer into the paint. Using the same stamps from the previous saw, I stamped my Santas and I pressed it right over on top of the saw, and I did overlap a little bit with the stamp. Well, the stamp on top of the transfer. And I just press down and lift up. And I really didn't see the S, so I just went back with one S. And sorry, you're gonna get to see a little bit of my gray hair. And I just went right over on top of the previous S, pushed firmly down, lifted up, and I could see my S much better. I used my ink pad. I juiced up the word workshop with ink, and I just pressed it right down on top of the saw blade. And I just wanted to make sure I got all the letters this time. So I'm just pressing firmly down on each letter, lifting up, and I have my workshop. The transfer does need to be sealed, so I just go over it with some Big Top from DIY, and I was able to go right over the archival ink. And I also went over the handle, so it kind of had a good seal before I decided to use the Fusion Antiquing Glaze. And I just went right over that handle, including the stamp, because it had some seal from the DIY. And then I just used a paper towel to wipe it off. And it just kind of gave it more of that darkened, age-worn effect instead of that just real bright red. I chose to use DIY dark wax. Using the same technique as the Santa, I'm just using my brush and I am stifling that wax right into the handle. Then it's like cleaning off my brush. I'm just kind of wiping it around the area of the saw, including the edges and inside the saw a little bit with all that excess wax on my brush, just to kind of dinge it up a little bit. I'm just randomly going over, adding some distressing to my saw, and using a paper towel, just wiping back that excess wax. And even off the saw blade too, I'm just gonna go over it a little bit and take a little bit of that extra wax off. And I do like that distressed look. So, what did you think? Was I able to elevate these projects to a different level using all the different items in my toolbox? Do you think they'll be replicated in the person selling next door to me? I'd love to know, one, which of these projects is your favorite? And also, what is the one thing when you're selling your homemade goods that you hear that irritates you the most? If you found this video inspirational, please hit subscribe below and follow me along on my creative journey. Thank you.